and white ones with crayons and people could color them in. Never thought of that. Keep people interested. Next time, let's do that. Crayola for sure. You don't want wax that comes off. This man's colored before. The king of the south in verse 5 is probably Ptolemy the First Soter. And he lived from 323 to 235. So this is verse 5, referring to this king of the south. And the one referred to as the strong one above him is the king of Syria. Because what's directly above the south, the north? That's probably Seleucus I Nicator. I wonder if he smoked. 312 to 81. Now, all of these names, all of these people will either have Ptolemy or Seleucus at the beginning because they are kind of like, you know how Elizabeth is of the Queen, a house of Windsor? Okay, so these people are of the house of Ptolemy. So you've heard of Ptolemy, but which Ptolemy have you heard of? You see, they all had different names. So in Egypt, the Ptolemies ruled, direct descendants of that general who took power from Alexander the Great and built. You've heard of the city of Alexandria, which is named after Alexander, who Ptolemy built the beautiful lighthouse that was there. Anyway, very interesting. I digress. These rulers took the title of king in 306 BC. So Seleucus had fled from Antiochus of Babylon, not Antiochus, I'm sorry, Antigonus. That's as close as you'll ever see to Antigonish. That's where I'm from. Phil of Antigonish. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was the Peter and Paul. Well, Peter and his brother, I can't think of his name, Larichus, that started that, and they developed the pizza, the wheel, and they were the one that developed the little crystals over here. That was their formula.
Yeah, but that one over there blew the
Yeah.
crystals into the water.
They also later built the lobster treat. Did you ever eat out there?
I have eaten the wheel.
They catered at my wedding. That's because I'm Peter of Antigonish, Phil of Antigonish.
They got a great racetrack.
And they do. I snuck on there a few times after I get in that. Thus paving the way for Seleucus to gain control of the entire Asia Minor to India. So what happens is, follow that again. So these rulers took title of the king in 306. Seleucus had fled from Antiochus of Babylon and was temporarily associated with Ptolemy. So they were working together, right? Those two generals were working together now, Egypt and Syria, and they combined their strength and defeated Antiochus, and thus they paved the way for the Seleucus, which are the Syrian kings, to gain control of the entire area of Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey and Iraq, Iran, all the way over Pakistan, Afghanistan, all the way over to India. So what they did was go back and recapture the land that had been fallen after Alexander the Great. So the Seleucids became very powerful. You will see that in the green in your map. See the green in your map there? You can see how powerful. What comes with land and cities and trade roads and everything? What comes? Wealth, taxes, slaves, all kinds of things. But it also takes armies to control these things, right? It takes government. So he became stronger than Ptolemy, who ruled Egypt. So even though Ptolemy helped the Seleucians, it was the Seleucians who became strong above him and had dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. So if you go back one page and read 11:5 again, doesn't it make sense now? And the king of the south, Egypt, Ptolemy, shall be strong. And one of his princes, that's the one to the north, the Seleucus, he shall be strong above him and have dominion, and his dominion shall be great dominion. Why? Because with the help of Ptolemy, he took over the entire thing and became very powerful, way more powerful than Ptolemy. So at this stage, if you want to say it, the Syrians are more powerful than the Egyptians at this stage. So I inserted another little map to show you, again, there's Ptolemy down there in Egypt. I think he looks...
He looks like Mark Antony.
Yeah, he does.
He was not Egyptian.
No, he's Roman. Interesting. Cleopatra's coming. Did you know Cleopatra's coming into this? I think you had read that. I think you. So, yeah, we're going to get Elizabeth Taylor into this yet. So now you can see how the two smaller generals, the two smaller areas, Macedonia or Macedon and Pergama, they've evolved, but they're very small, right? Basically modern Greece and Macedonia. And then how big the Seleucid Empire has become by this point. And how much power there is. And you see where Jerusalem is? Right in the middle of everything. God's apple of it's God's city, and it's always right in the middle of everything. Okay, ready to go to verse 6? After some time, they will become allies. Whose allies? Ptolemy, the Egyptians, and Syrian, the Seleucids. They become allies. Now listen to this. The daughter of the king of the south, so the daughter of the king of Egypt, will go to the king of the north to make an alliance. But she will not retain her power, and he and his power will not last. In those days she will be betrayed together with her royal escort and her father and the one who supported her. Now that's detail, isn't it? Man, you think you're reeling that out of a Harlequin romance. I never read a Harlequin romance.
James Bond.
Yeah. The expression, after some years, means at the end of many years, really. So in the passage of time, over time, it's natural for these. You see it in the European nations. After time, the king of Spain may offer his daughter to the king of England to see if they can get a political alliance. It's not a love relationship. They might not even consummate the marriage, but it's just so that there's politics, and they're using their children. Often these are just children. I'm talking pre-adolescent children that are being married off, so you get this alliances. And so that's what happens here. So there would be an intermarriage political between Egypt and Syria, and it's described in verse 6. The participants were the king of the south, so probably Ptolemy II Philadelphus in around 285, and his daughter. His daughter's name was Berenice, and She was married to Antiochus II Theos, or Antiochus God, 261 to 240. That's when he lived. In about 252 BC. So we're down pretty far now. We're 252 years before Christ. But passed over without mention is Antiochus I Soter, who lived from 281 to 261. The marriage was consummated at the demand of Ptolemy Philadelphus, who required Antiochus to divorce his own wife, Laodicea, or Laodicea. Now, here's what happens. Ptolemy says, okay, we need an alliance. I'm going to send up my daughter, and she's going to marry the king. But the king's already married. No problem. You divorce her, and you marry this one. Now, that doesn't make for very good relationships, does it? So, for political reasons, there's a political marriage that takes place. Can I tell you a little story? Here's a little funny story. Kim and I are in Sri Lanka, and we were quite young at the time. I was 26, Kim was 22, 21. Anyway, we're younger than we are now. And we were at a party, and someone came to us and said, "Oh, you are such a lovely couple. You're such a lovely couple. Is your marriage a love marriage or an arranged marriage?" Because there, arranged marriages were the norm. Very few people, but they were kind of noticing we were holding hands, and, we were 26 and 21. Exchanging a kiss here and there. What in the world are you doing? Like, is that an arrangement? Like, no, we have a love.
You should have jumped on that and said, "You should see the dowry I got."
Yeah. I should have said, "Do you think she would have married me out of love?" I think it's arranged. Anyway, what we call in North America a shotgun. So it passed over without mention. So you have this arranged marriage. Now, in order to facilitate this marriage, his intent was to provide a basis of agreement, literally, to make a straightening between the two nations. Let's get this straightened out. We're going to get married. Everything's going to go great because we're going to have kids together. We're going to share grandkids. Right, exactly. Who are you going to go to war against? Well, they're our cousins. They're our first cousin. We can't go to war. I used to play cards with him. As verse 6 explains, however, the union was not successful in that is, physical or political power, and neither of the male participants prospered, as it is indicated, but she will not retain her power, and he and his power will not last. In those days, she will be betrayed together with and the one who supported her. Within a few years of the marriage, Ptolemy dies. So Ptolemy is the king of the south who sent her up in the first place, right? He's dead, and Antiochus, who he's trying to make the agreement with, that she marries, when Ptolemy dies, he drops Ptolemy's daughter and remarries his old wife. I guess that was the love marriage. And to gain revenge on this, Laodicea murdered her husband as well as his Egyptian wife. So are you following this? Oh, you're doing good. Yeah. Truth is stranger than friction. Berenice and his infant son of Antiochus and Berenice. So Ptolemy, who had the bright idea, he dies. His daughter goes up, she's married, ruins the marriage. Then when he dies, she's kicked out. Laodicea moves in. She's got some power now, and so for revenge, she kills her husband. She kills the woman that she married, and their young baby. That's not good for relationships. So what Ptolemy meant to build relationships has the opposite effect. Now you have that happening. So I put another little chart up there so you can kind of see where we're at. So we started with the original founder of Syria, Seleucus, back in 312, and the original Ptolemy back the same time. Now look at all these kings we've moved through already. And you can see there's Laodice and Berenice, and then how Berenice survives. And her escort, the reference to her royal escort and her father is of course, to Ptolemy II, where death was precipitated, the murders which followed. So there he is, Ptolemy II. My arrow is supposed to be back one notch. I apologize, that long arrow went into Ptolemy III. It should have stopped at Ptolemy II. All right, moving on. One from her family line will arise and take her place. Who are we talking about? What woman? Yeah, that's right. And she will attack the forces of the king of the north and enter his fortress. So one of her family members is going to attack the forces of the king of the north or enter the fortress in Syria, and he will fight against them and be victorious. He will also seize their gods, their metal images, their valuable articles of silver and gold, and carry them off to Egypt. For some years he will leave the king of the north alone. Then the king of the north will invade the realm of the king of the south, but will retreat to his own country. Now that's pretty straightforward, but let's walk through it anyway. So following the events of verse 6, a new king from Egypt known as Ptolemy III, which I point to with that arrow inadvertently, Euergetes, succeeds in winning a war over the king of the north, Seleucus Canicius. And as the prophecy indicates, he enters the fortress. Now, it's one time they win the war. You could say they win the war, but they just, got the land, but they didn't go into the fortress, the fortified city. But it's significant when you go into the fortress. Remember when Jerusalem was conquered? What did they take away when they took away Daniel and his other? All the holy instruments. See, it was like the ultimate insult. We've got your gods. We've got control of your religion. Our gods are greater than your gods, right? So that was the ultimate insult. And so he will also seize their gods, their metal images, and their valuable articles, silver and gold, and carry them off to Egypt. One from her family line will arise and take her place. Indicates that it's a person from ancestral line of Berenice. Now, it's not her child, but her father. It's Berenice's father who does this act, and consequently the son of her parents. So her brother Ptolemy Euergetes is the successor of Ptolemy Philadelphus. And they carry away the gods of molten images, indicates total defeat of the northern kingdom. Total defeat, because that's a metaphor or what's the word I'm looking for? Another way of saying total defeat when you carry off their gods. Annihilation. Commemoration of this deed, Ptolemy Euergetes erected a monument called Marmor Auditorium, which boasts that he subjugated Mesopotamia, Persia, Tunisia, and Media, and all the countries as far as Bactria. Now, if you want to look go back and look at a map with me. This map I showed you before on page 8. Remember how, if you're with me, you can see how this has flipped. When we looked at this before, it was the Seleucids that conquered all this land. Now, if we were flipping this map, it would be all orange. The Ptolemies now control all the way to Bactria. Do you see where it is? Up in the northern corner of the green? And Persia, and so on. So, all of a sudden now you have a flipping, and the Ptolemies, or Egypt, is overrunning Syria. What's in the middle of all of this all the time? Israel. It reminds me of Poland during the wars. Up come the Germans, and they raid Poland. Back come the Russians, and then they go and back and forth, and they get hit both ways, and back and forth. And I'm sure other Eastern countries suffered similar fates between these empires. Following, so the precise accuracy of the prophecy written by Daniel 300 years before it happens has occasioned the attack of critics, but its accuracy is support of the accuracy of the scripture prophecy as a whole. Can I know I stop and say that every once in a while, but guys, we're reading something. We're reading something that was written 300 years in advance with such detail. Naming countries, naming names that didn't exist when it was written. Incredible. This Bible is reliable. This is the Bible that you pray. This is the Bible you take in your hands and say, because for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Is that true or not? Well, he said, well, it's the same book that this is out of. Build faith tonight. Build faith. If you don't build history knowledge, build faith. So the precise, okay. So then in verse 9, the Seleucus, the king of the north, several years after the Egyptian invasion, was defeated completely and was forced to return to his own land. This, of course, was only the beginning of the seesaw battle between the two nations. The inclusion of this background material leads up to an important point, which is the burden of prophecy of verses 10 and 9. The ascendancy of Syria over Egypt and the return of the Holy Land to the Syrian control. This sets the stage for the persecutions of Israel under Antiochus Epiphanes, which is the major concern of verses 21 through 35. In other words, Egypt's got it one time, Syria's got it another. But it's very important to God that Syria is in control when Antiochus Epiphanes is the leader of Israel, because he's the one who hates the Jews and is going to come in and be like an antichrist. And we will get into that. How are we doing for time? Okay, show of hands who would like to finish this up so that we can move on to the next section next time. We've got about 10 minutes. Okay? If I'm not done in 10 minutes, I'll leave you to read the rest. Is that okay? I saw a few hands. I'm going to go with it. So the next section is actually all reading. It's just basically reading. His sons will prepare for war and assemble a great army, which will sweep out like an irresistible flood and carry a battle as far as the fortress. Then the king of the south will march out in a rage and fight against the king of the north, who will raise a large army, but it will be defeated. And when the army is carried off, the king of the south will be filled with pride and will slaughter many thousands. And yet he will not remain triumphant, for the king of the north will muster another army larger than the first, and after several years he will advance with a huge army fully equipped. Wouldn't you hate to have lived in that time? You're having kids, and as soon as your kid's old enough to carry a sword, off he goes to war. You never see him again. It's just back and forth and this fighting. And this is greed. This is avarice for pure power. They had enough food in their land. They had enough of everything, but they wanted what the others had. This is the vacuum left by the fall of Alexander the Great and all these hundreds of years of fighting. In those many will rise against the king of the south. Those who are violent among your own people will rebel in fulfillment of the vision, but without success. Then the king of the north will come and build up a siege ramps and will capture a fortified city, and the forces of the south will be powerless to resist. Even with their best troops will not be able to stand. The invader will do as he pleases. No one will be able to stand against him. Listen to this. This is very important. This is the king of the north, or Syria. He will establish himself in the beautiful land. What's the beautiful land? Beulah land, Israel, the land promised to Jews, and will have the power to destroy it. He will determine to come with might of his entire kingdom and make an alliance with the king of the south. And he will give him a daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the kingdom, but his plans will not succeed or help him. Then he will turn his attention to the coastlands, which is the Mediterranean, where Israel is, and take many of them, but a commander will be put in an end to his insolence and will turn his insolence back on him. After this, he will turn back toward the fortresses of his own country, but will stumble and fall and be seen no more. Now, let's just break this down quickly. Although Seleucus Canisius was unsuccessful in his attack on Egypt, his successors, his sons, proved to be more successful. Seleucus III came to ultimately untimely end, and he was killed in battle in Asia Minor. But the task was capably carried on by Antiochus III the Great. Remember that name, Antiochus the Great. Because the passing of Seleucus, the plural from the first part of verse 10 is changed to the singular, because there's no more Antiochuses, there's just one. And Antiochus the Great was able to mount several campaigns against Egypt, more because of his laziness of the Egyptian ruler, Ptolemy the Philip Taylor. Then his own military might be restored, the territory as far as south Gaza to Syria. Remember Gaza? You hear Gaza all the time. It's in modern-day Israel. The approach of the armies of the Near Egypt proper aroused the Egyptian ruler, who assembled a large army of combat Antiochus in verse 11. In 2017 BC, Antiochus met the Egyptian army at the Palestinian border at Raphia. And the Egyptian army was directed by Ptolemy, accompanied by his sister wife. Yes, sister wife. Arsinoe. And there, being very careful, there were about 70,000 soldiers on each side. The battle resulted in a complete victory for Egypt, and Jerome comments. So Jerome was a Christian writer. The prophecy was fulfilled that the multitude of Syrians was given into the hand of the Egyptians. However, a peace had to be arranged because Antiochus had managed to escape. Because that ruler, Ptolemy Philip Taylor, was too lazy to chase him. As verse 12 indicates, the Egyptian monarch was too lazy to pursue him for his advantage, and although the battle was disastrous for the Syrians, it brought a peace between the two nations, at least temporarily. Meanwhile, Antiochus turns his attention to the conquest to the east, in which he is quite successful, gathering strength and wealth. So the east would be toward Babylon. In that period, 212 to 204, he advanced east to the borders of India and far north as the Caspian Sea. You guys know the Caspian Sea, right? Is that near your land? No, too far south. Ptolemy, Philip Taylor, and his queen died mysteriously in 203 BC and were succeeded by their infant son, Ptolemy Epiphanes. In 2001 BC, Antiochus managed to assemble another great army and again began a series of attacks on Egypt as described in verse 13 and 16. The expression, "Those who are violent among your own people will rebel in fulfillment of vision but without success," refers to persons who violate the law and justice, hence they are robbers of men and violence. They probably refer to a number of Jews who launched illegal raids with the Egyptians against the Syrians, kind of like guerrilla warfare, right? And of course, this could help lead to the later attack by Antiochus Epiphanes because he's ticked off at the Jews who were pilfering him. And already recorded in Daniel 8 and 9. These troubles appropriately can be regarded as consequences of the revolt of the Egyptians against Syria, encouraged by the rising power of Rome. Now, remember I said, as we get down there, we're getting into the legs. Rome is now becoming powerful. It's coming out of Europe and now starting to move into the Middle East. By the time Jesus is around, 200 years later, Rome runs the world. So remember that you have this what is left over of the Greco Empire, these two, the kings of the north and south, or Egypt and Syria, are going to gradually just be overwhelmed by Rome. And so Rome is starting to get in there. Now listen to this. So, Rome threatened Syria and Egypt, brought back the Egyptian army led by Scopas, were defeated by Phineas near the headwaters of the Jordan River. Antiochus III subsequently forced Scopas to surrender at Sidon, referred to as the most fenced cities, literally a city of fortifications, which the Seleucid king captured in 199-198. So now we're into the 100s. This victory resulted in the Syrian occupation of all Palestinians as far south as Gaza. The allusion to "no one will be able to stand against them" is the unsuccessful attempt by the Egyptian leaders Europus, Menalcus, and Demonenius to rescue the besieged Scopas from Sidon. Threatened by Rome, however, Antiochus effected a diplomatic settlement with Egypt by marrying his daughter, Cleopatra, to the young king Ptolemy IV Epiphanes in 192 BC. So you see now you're starting to get Rome involved, and you're going to start to see some of the history we know coming out of Rome getting involved with the Cleopatra and some of this stuff that will happen. I don't know if it's this Cleopatra or one later. So, Ptolemy, so a daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the kingdom, but his plans will not succeed or help him. That is, Antiochus the Great desired, through his betrothal of his young daughter, a 7-year-old, Ptolemy, to ruin his former opponent and present an ally. But Cleopatra sided with her husband and not her father, spoiling his political moves. I love it. I want to marry her to a 7-year-old boy. She's going to run the country. What's she do? She listens to her 7-year-old husband and not her dad. Antiochus the Great begins to suffer, reverses, however, as indicated in verse 18, where "but a commander will put an end to his insolence and will turn his insolence back on him." This refers to Roman consulate Lucius Scipio Acetius, and he defeats Antiochus. The reference to the end of his insolence and will turn his insolence back on him refers to Antiochus. Scornful treatment of his Roman ambassadors at the meeting of Lysimachia, when he said contemporaneously Asia did not concern them, the Romans, and he was not subject to their orders. Well, that's a slap in the face. He said, like, Romans, get out of here. This is none of you're Europeans. We don't want anything to do with you. And that was an insult. That was insolence. So when he does this defeat came about in the following manner. Having successfully sustained conquest against Egypt by defeating Scopas, Antiochus then turned his attention to the threat of the west and attempted, listen to this, attempted to copy the conquest of Alexander the Great by conquering Greece. Now, we just talked about this really early on. How hard is it to take a army and march it and then ship it all the way to Greece from Asia Minor? You're talking big money, big time, big everything, food, big interest. And he tries to do it and is remarkably unsuccessful. He's defeated in 191 BC in Thermopylae and also just north of Athens. And then in 189, he's defeated in Magnesia and Milk of Magnesia and Meander River southeast of Ephesus from the Bible, by soldiers of Rome, and Pergama, which is also mentioned in the Bible as one of the places Paul visits, under the river leadership of Roman general Scipio, who you've heard of before. So this fulfilled the prophecies of Daniel in verses 18 and 19. And then a historic viewpoint was important in removing from Europe the control by Asian governments. You see, what has to happen, according to the Word of God, is that now the greatest empire around is going to be the Roman Empire that's going to last 1,000 years. And where is it centered? In Europe. And where will that last empire come that will arise and come against and be part of the revived Roman Empire? Is going to come out of Europe. And so getting Asian armies out of control of Europe was very, very important biblically. And so this also paved the way for Roman expansion later with Antiochus the Great, who could have gone down in history as one of the great conquerors of the ancient world if he'd been content to leave Greece alone. Instead, he fulfilled prophecy of verse 19 in that he had returned to his own land, defeated, broken, and he was killed trying to plunder a temple in Elam. I want to just listen to this last paragraph, and this is why I wanted to get here today. From the standpoint of the history of Israel, this was important because Antiochus the Great, this man who just gets defeated, right, was followed by Seleucus IV, Philip Taylor, who in turn was succeeded by Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the notorious persecutor of the Jews described in detail in Daniel 21 through 35. In these prophecies, properly interpreted, is an accurate prophetic picture of the period, which would be remarkable even if it was history. As prophecy, it bears unmistakable print of the divine inspiration.
Pastor Phil, do you think that they had access to the book of Daniel?
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Or playing out
Yeah,
that was already said?
I wonder. Nina, you ask great questions. She was wondering if, because Daniel was written prior to this, if any of these rulers had read it and saw themselves in it. That would be interesting. There's no real reference to that, so I don't know. Maybe not. It was, yes. It was being protected in that library at Quantum. Yeah. So I wanted to get you that far tonight for a reason. I know that was heavy, probably the heavy. Relax. We're through the heavy stuff now. But I wanted to get you to Antiochus Epiphanes. And there was no other way of getting you through there except going through that history. So what's your takeaway tonight? Isn't God amazing how he master plans history. We see it as a series of random events. To God, it's all precisely planned and timed. Paul says in Acts chapter 17 that God created all men and times and places they should live, that they should somehow seek after him. Brother Bubba?
Oh, no, I just want to say that it would be very difficult for one person to orchestrate this, to play it out.
Yes.
So it's not possible, except all of them have that script at hand. Daniel's script at hand at one point in time. So
Amazing, isn't it?
yeah.
You think of the thousands of characters that are involved. Like, I mean, just try to, like, even if someone was going to say, let's put this together as a movie, they couldn't do it. They could not do it. You couldn't reconstruct that. So it's just amazing.
It's odd that every time we try to attack Greece, like you said, to move that far with an army,
Yeah.
try to feed them, try to care for them, and
Yeah.
they'd be dead tired when they got there. Like they'd be going over on boats.
I would love someday if we could get Larry to tell us the logistics of how hard it would be to take the 1 million Israelites who lived in Egypt with all of their animals and all the gold and silver out of Egypt and get it across the Red Sea. Because we tend to picture, like the cardboard cutouts from Sunday school. You see about 12 Israelites going across. It's crazy. The logistics are just. Yeah. Now to feed them, where do they go to the bathroom? Because you get dysentery very quickly. And the Bible says, I love the Bible never puts anything in by mistake. They crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. You take a spring day in PEI after it rained a little bit and follow 20 head of cattle out to the pasture and see if you're walking on dry ground. You're walking through pure muck. Take 1 million people. Go out to the grounds next week after 40,000 people are there in the rain, wading up to their knees. Well, I love being with you on Wednesday nights. Lord bless you.